This is going to be a Little Dove production. That is what I'm using as my moniker for these videos. My name's Eva, and today I'm going to talk about Frida Kahlo in terms of pain and art. And I'm going to talk about it pretty much starting with her bus accident and then going into how she used her art as a way to transfer the physical pain she was in into a passionate career that really helped her stay distracted from what really was a life of constant physical pain. The interesting part about why I'm doing this video is because in 2019, I was held up in a robbery during the daytime, and I was pistol whipped and the back of the head. So I got a permanent visual impairment from it, and of course, a lifelong repercussions, because when you have that loss of consciousness, usually with a blunt object, you're probably going to have long-term effects. So the reason I bring this up is because I was a huge fan of Frida Kahlo all my life, probably since I was a teenager, but how I saw her art and what she did with her art back before my injury and then how I see it now is completely different. And I kind of want to touch base on that. This is a painting that she did of, you can see everybody on the bus. And I guess she's the youngest girl next to the guy with the overalls. This is a drawing she did at the bottom. It's like an ink drawing. And it's got her as a young girl kind of at the bottom with a French page girl haircut. And it's a little bit more graphic because it's after the accident. Basically, two buses collided. And when they did that, where she was sitting, you know, the bars that you hold on to like in a subway to hold yourself up, the bar pulled out, penetrated through her back and went in her back, out her pelvis. So she was broken in 3 different places, both in her pelvis and also in her back. And at one point they even had to re-break her back and try to put it back in a way that was more viable for her to be able to function. She was lifted out of the accident with it still impaled in her, the bar, and taken to the hospital. She was 18 years old. This was obviously, you would think, the most traumatic thing that ever happened to her. However, in her autobiography, she was stated saying that she was married to Diego Rivera, which I don't know if that rings a bell, but Diego Rivera was one of the premier, most famous mural painters ever. Mexican, outstanding. He has work Coit Tower, San Francisco, Radio City, Music Hall, New York City. I mean, all over the country. He's, you know, the top-notch muralist. And she was married to him. He was very, I guess, you know, artists sometimes have difficult tempers, but mainly he was a cheater. And at one point he had an affair with her sister. And she was also unable really to have children. She did try to carry one pregnancy, but it did not work out. But when asked what was the greatest, you know, somebody alluded to the fact that the bus accident must have been the greatest pain of her life, and she kind of coyly laughed at that point to the interviewer and said, Well, actually, the bus came second, and I think Diego came first. So she was quite a spitfire. This is a portrait of her painting from her bed. And this is pretty much what she would do in recovery. This is how she would make herself happy when she was recouping and, you know, having to deal with back braces, having to deal with constant ailments, paralysis, you know, just everything. Like just even getting dressed. She always wore elaborate hair. She always wore flowers in her hair. She always had traditional costumes on of the culture. But, you know, it would be a painstaking experience for her to put them on. And in this portrait, she has the photographer had written down that she is quoted as saying, "I am not sick." She said, "I may be sick, I may be broken, but I am happy to be alive as long as I can paint." So as long as she was able to do her craft, you know, especially during these times of illness, you know, she really, it was like not just a distraction, but a cathartic release of everything that she was going through. So she was very famous. I mean, if you've ever heard of her, she is strikingly famous for always doing self-portraits. And lots of people have said, well, why did she just always paint herself? Well, I think from what I've gathered from reading about her is she was very focused on sort of the transformation of what, I don't want to say her injury because that seems like it's making it seem so ordinary. I guess the transformation of what illness or injury had done to her body. It was like her self-portraits were, she said, you know, she was quoted as saying, "I know myself the best. That is why I express myself this way with these," you know. And she would have other, she did other portraits of people. She did many portraits of animals, of people in her countryside, you know, just doing just tasks, you know, gardens. She did, you know, landscapes at different times, but really you can almost tell the sort of fevered pitch with her self-portraits. They're undeniable how much power they have. Here's one pretty self-explanatory where she has a metal rod going through her spinal column, and I think that's pretty obvious what she's talking about, the sheer pain of what she had to go through. She, at one point later in her life, she got gangrene in one of her legs and had to have it amputated at the knee, but I think that was pretty late in her life. Not that she lived that long. I mean, she lived to middle age, but here's another photo of her, and what she's doing here that's so amazing is she would have these body casts, and here she is, she's painting each little part of her cast with flowers and delicate admonishments. You know, she has her hair done as she always did in her traditional style. I mean, she just looks so classy. She just looks so oddly content. This is one of the more famous ones. This is a, it's like a dualistic, it's her and herself, and it's a heart, almost like they're sharing a heart. It's almost like she made herself into twins. And again, she has the traditional costumes on, and she has the hearts outside the body. And in the one, she has sort of a prim and proper dress, and on the other, the white one, you know, it's stained with blood. So it was kind of like, in the one, she's trying to show kind of like social decorum, and in the other one, she's just kind of letting it be what it is. And I definitely understand that. having a disability is, not that I know what Frida Kahlo thinks, but I would imagine that from my experience, you do spend, oh, I should say I have spent a lot of time in the last 5 years sort of covering it up and trying to make it less obvious, or just hiding it, pretending, acting, downplaying it. I don't think that society at large is really educated about disabilities, and I think that it makes people very uncomfortable. And mine is a very confusing one. It's called ocular motor dysfunction, but basically it's just a fancy word for saying when you read, I didn't know this, but when you read, your eyes, your pupils have to track back and forth in a smooth fashion. That's how you're able to read a sentence. That's how you're able to perceive, like, lines or numbers, everything, is because your eyes do this smooth motion back and forth, back and forth. But when you have a brain injury, and especially post-concussion syndrome like I have, what happens is they jump. Your pupils, they don't stay static, but your pupils is small, right? So it's not like people can visually see you having these problems. But I take pictures, selfies of when this is happening, and it's, or videos, and you can see it when you're looking for it. But what happens when those jumps are happening is, like when my eyes, like, first thing in the day, I can read normal. But then as they get tired, because they get tired out really easily, because your eyes aren't meant to ever have to do that. That's like highly abnormal. So your body just shuts down. So what happens is it starts out smooth, and then it just starts to get, like, wavy, and then it just starts to do that jerky, jumpy thing they call saccades. So what then happens is the letters and numbers, they swap place. It's almost like being dyslexic. So it's like, and then the lines merge. And so, like, like 2 lines would turn into 1. So even if you go try to, I always try to get like large print books, but it doesn't work, because most large print books, to save money, they put the lines single spaced. So then the lines merge. So I would have to have everything double spaced. Whatever. The whole point is, the only way that I can describe it is that before I had my injury, I thought you either had you either were blind or you weren't. You either had vision or you didn't. And I did know that there was, an area where it was like some people have low vision needs, where they've had some sort of cataract, or they've had something, disease, or some breakdown. Something's happened, glaucoma, where they're not blind legally, but there's something in the way of what they're reading or seeing. But that's pretty much all I knew. Mine is bizarre because it changes during the day. So as I'm using my eyes, and I mean, it'll happen pretty fast, they will break down and they will stop working. So, and it's really things close up. So like an object far away, I can, like, if there's a table or a chair or a lamp, or if I'm driving and there's a stop sign and it's, big and red with big letter, there's no problem. But it's that finite, it's the multiple small things in a row that you have to interpret like a sentence. So where was I going with this? Let's see. I guess the whole point is, I had no idea that somebody could wake up in the morning and be normal, and then suddenly, within an hour, have a visual disability. That was not something I understood. And then they could rest for, in a dark room with, ice or whatever, and then come back, and then they would almost have okay vision again. And then they would go through the same thing, and then the same thing would happen. And, like all day long it breaks down. And then, usually by like 3 or 4 o'clock, it's done, it's over. And then at night I usually don't I don't rarely ever watch TV, or if I do, just listen to it. I don't read for pleasure anymore at all. I just use audiobooks. But the whole point is it's a big, complicated, long, pretty boring story. So about what I do every day. So I would imagine for Frida Kahlo, hers was so complicated because she was injured in multiple places. And we're talking about catastrophic injuries. And for a woman, for her pelvis, this is the center of childbirth. So, she had to know at 18, to get that news that the chances of her having a live birth were probably minimal. So that's, quite a lot for somebody to know all those things about their future all at once, and then to have to deal with chronic severe pain every day. And then she still went on to become, the premier female artist, of Mexico, which is like in of itself during that time period was, the 40s. It was not something that happened very often, that a woman would become a famous artist. She became a cultural icon, really. And what she did was just, she broke, every boundary, that could possibly be put up, every obstacle for a woman. And, she just was a complete winner. And you can see more from her paintings, how she's sort of dealing with her chronic pain. I don't know if you can tell, but there's a skeleton on the top of the bunk bed, and then that's her in the lower one. She, had very, very, graphic dreams, nightmares, night terrors from her PTSD. I'm sure they didn't call it PTSD back then. This is a sad one. This is when she lost her baby, and she has the baby sort of floating up in the air, almost like a balloon, and tied to her by the umbilical cord. But I'm not sure how many months she was along, but it was obviously the great tragedy of her life. This is kind of how she's expressing it. This is a portrait of her as a deer, and as you can tell, she has all these arrows in her, and she's bleeding. So it's pretty clear that she's, symbolically showing what it feels like to be her. This is her cradling Diego. He's got like what almost looks like, I don't know, some kind of tattoo or marking on his forehead. It almost looks like a third eye. And she's cradling him, with the ancient mother statue. And, the hands of the earth are holding her. This is one of her holding her own back brace while she's in her full regalia, and she has a political flag, and behind her is herself as an 18-year-old girl with the bleeding injuries after they took the pole out. So there you go. She has the symbolism of the moon in the background. This is one where she's not really, I'm not sure if this is her depicted or not with another woman. It's hard to tell. Or there's monkeys in the background. She was really famous for doing monkeys. And this is more like about the culture of the country, not about her injury. Though the woman behind her is wearing draped in a red cloth that almost looks like blood. And again, it's one person holding another, so it's almost like that last one where she was holding her husband, you know, cradled in her arms like a baby. This is Diego and her, probably at some kind of function. Since they were both artists, I'm sure they went to quite a lot of events. And this is one of my favorites. It's her looking at herself in the mirror, and it's really stunning. I mean, she's just gorgeous. But it's kind of amazing because it's like she's mirroring herself in this, but it's a photograph. But in a way, it's kind of like her art, right? Because it's that duplicity like she had with the two hearts and the twins. I love this photo of her. She also wore amazing jewelry and, you know, always the flowers in her hair from her garden. I mean, she's just magnificent. These are some portraits of her in the hospital with various nurses. The last one's in color. And you can see her, you know, doing her art. I mean, she often had to be laid up for months. We're not talking about, you know, a weekly stay. These are many times between surgeries. She's got this little chihuahua in this one. She's so amazing with animals. And, you know, she's just stunning. But always that expression, like she's famous for the unibrow. That's like one of her trademarks. And then also sort of like the stern expression, like she's never really seen, you know, in her portraits, anything but like kind of a poker face. But her eyes, like if you look at her eyes, like she's just showing everything in them. I mean, she's quite remarkable. I love this one. Oh my gosh. She's got the cigarette in her mouth. She loved to smoke. I mean, not all the time, but, you know, for fun. But again, it's another self-portrait. This one's actually, this is a happy one. I'm wrong. It's her and Diego, probably early on in their marriage because she looks so young. And yeah, they actually look happy. I don't really like all these, they do all these modern interpretations of her. I don't really care for them, but I did find this one that I you know, had a fancy to. Just because it's got her with a heart. And it reminds me of the one with her and the two hearts with the twins, reflection of herself. And then I love this with the shadows on her face in the sun. It's almost like she's reaching out, you know, to have the sun like warm her face while she's, you know, recovering in the hospital bed. It's beautiful. Now, like I said, she never had children, but there is, I don't know if this is a child in their family or a friend's child, but it does sort of show, like, you know, she did, you know, in this photo, she looks very maternal. And I put one more modern one in just because I couldn't help myself. And I just love the idea of like her sort of free attitude. She just kind of did what she wanted. She would dance. Sometimes she would dress in suits, like almost like a man, but she still had her makeup, and she was just very avant-garde. She just experimented with fashion. So here's one with her with a cigar, and I love the colors, and I kind of just love the freedom in her face. But of course, this has nothing to do with the real Frida Kahlo. Didn't nobody. This was done like recently. And then I'm getting close here to the end of the video, but this is a portrait taken during my rehab, and you can see kind of the eyes that are misaligned, which is how they are. But this was before I started doing heavy rehab and eye exercises every day, so they were misaligned. Now they're perfectly aligned. Not when I read, but in general. I don't know if you can tell right there that one of them's like this high up and the other one's kind of down here. Like, that's not right. And I guess the last things I was going to show before I end this is also part of my recovery was doing puzzles, just sort of get my eyes tracking things so that I could start doing smooth pursuits. So this is a puzzle I did with a friend and then got it framed, and this was like a big accomplishment. I don't know if you can see how big it is, but pretty amazing. Took a long time, but that's just a way that I used art to get better. So you see, art is very healing, and I would probably become an art therapist if it didn't take so much freaking education to become one. All right. Okay, that's the end of this. And I don't know if I'm going to do Frida Kahlo again. I think I'm going to pick a different artist. I think I'm going to just do disabilities. Well, disabilities sounds so boring. I'm just going to do pain and art. So I'll come back on here with a different artist. And I'll just keep going through artists, and artists seem to have artists and writers seem to have the most dramatic lives ever. That's probably why they have something to create. And they're usually pretty interesting people. So I don't think I'm going to run out of subjects. All right. And it's going to be like mental pain also. I'm not going to just do physical pain, but today we were doing physical pain. All right. Bye.